You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Claire, I'd like to talk to you about the house.
Did you die in this house? How did you die?
Whatever it is trying desperately to communicate. What is it in that house, Claire? What is it doing? Why is it trying to reach me?
That's Father Heron in 5A. He's blind. Blind? Well, then what does he look at?
There is evil. Evil everywhere. Turn around, Allison. Look behind you. There is horror. There is darkness.
I think Allison may die.
But watching, waiting, warding off evil, there is hope.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature Grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Evil Santa Claus is coming to town. Join the sleaze, everybody.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we are coming up on our 4th year of the show and of doing bonus episodes, which is really crazy. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have a few people make the jump this week, so give them their shout-outs here. We have Asante Amani, we have Mitch Wall, Nick Metler, Brandon Estevez, who upgraded his patronage. We have Benjamin. We have Connor McGonigal, who pledged at $10 a month and is going to be joining us for our virtual monthly screenings that we do for the $10 patrons, which is going to be a lot of fun this month because it is the holiday season. And of course, you got to know, I don't even know if I've told Jamie this, I am hunting down a copy of Jack Frost 2 for us.
Excellent. A classic.
So I'm hoping that that's what we end up doing. It'll be officially announced by the time you guys are listening. This might actually already be officially announced, but I'm still in the process of hunting it down, and hopefully that's what we're doing for December virtual screening with everyone. And that'll be a lot of fun because we did cover the first Jack Frost, which is not the Michael Keaton family film, the slasher version of the same film that came out 1 year earlier about a serial killer who turns into Frosty the Snowman.
Man, is it dumb.
And it's stupid. But it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
We have Gomez Adams, who signed up at the annual tier. So if anyone was unaware, you can't do that. You can sign up for an entire year of the show and save 10% off your monthly subscription. So thanks to Gomez Adams for that. Wesley Eddings, Lachlan Saunders, Andy Bolton, Mark Thorne. What is the milk? Either way, he also signed up for a year MLCGS. So thank you. I don't know what that spells, but thanks for signing up for the year. We really appreciate that.
Yes.
Nicholas Birkin, Jay, Darren, Twomey, and that's everyone. So thanks
Thank you guys.
to all of you. Hope you're all enjoying those bonus episodes. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know that you are. I see you right now listening on Apple Podcasts. Scroll down to the very bottom. Give us a good old rating and review down there. We've been getting actually quite a few reviews lately, and they've been really helping us out. So if you haven't done it yet, please consider doing that. It helps us climb the ranks at iTunes and find new listeners. And the very last plug is merch. It is the holiday season. If you like Sleazoids and you want your little sibling to wear a bloody knife shirt, that is something that you can do. There's a link in the description. You can get posters, you can get shirts, you can get hoodies, notebooks, pillows, whatever you can think of. You can probably get the poster art that local horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show. So yeah, that link is in the description, also at sleazoidspodcast.com. But yeah, that is the intro. It is becoming a mouthful. Welcome back. I am your host, as always, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us, and we would have been kicking off December and the holiday season, how everyone does by getting really down bad and discussing the ickiest 90s thrillers, erotic thrillers specifically, that we could have possibly talked about. We talked about Disclosure from 1994, a movie about Demi Moore being a powerful corporate woman girl boss who tries to rape Michael Douglas. There's a little bit of a gender flip there. It's so stupid, and it pretty much doesn't work, but it was a blast to talk about.
Yeah, I had fun.
And then we paired it with Jade from 1995, directed by William Friedkin, starring show regular, friend of the show, I'd even go as far as to say, David Caruso.
Definitely friend of the show, 100%.
He doesn't know about us, but we know about him, and we respect his attempt in the 90s to break out from TV and to be a genuine movie star. It didn't quite work for him, but he was a lot of fun to watch in Jade, which has more of a procedural bent to it, but definitely gets pretty nasty and gets a little eye emoji. Gets a little, it's a little erotic thriller
Gets a little Epstein-esque.
Gets a little Epstein-esque in there. So yeah, if you haven't heard that episode, we had special guest Meg Shields on 2 weeks ago to talk about that. It was a lot of fun. It's on any podcast listener of choice. And then last week, we took a bit of a left turn. You know, we branched off going super icky sleaze, and we talked about West Side Story from 1961, the obviously very famous musical directed by Robert Wise. And yeah, we did that one obviously in conjunction with the newly released Spielberg one, which by the time you guys are listening to this, I imagine people are already out and watching it. But we really wanted to do that too, because I watched, I did a big Ferrera run early in the pandemic, Abel Ferrera, and there was a film that he did called China Girl that kind of blew my mind, which was the pairing we ended up doing with West Side Story, because it was literally the exact same plot as West Side Story.
Yeah.
Literally beat for beat. I mean, obviously West Side Story is also Romeo and Juliet, but like China Girl, this film, literally in 1987, it takes like images and direct beats from West Side Story. It's literally Romeo and Juliet in like crime New York, but instead of sort of like a white gang and a Puerto Rican gang, it's literally like Little Italy versus Chinatown. Yeah. And Abel Ferrera focuses a lot on the sort of inner workings of the mob infighting and the gang violence on the streets and everything. It's kind of like it was a little bit of a test run for some of the style he would kind of master in something like King of New York.
Yeah, he really took a focus on the gang culture rather than the romance. He was much more focused on the violence and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So either way, it was worth doing West Side Story just to talk about like an Abel Ferrera film that like I talk to people about who even like Abel Ferrera and they haven't heard of that film. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That was last week's bonus episode. But moving on to this week, we have a very special guest joining us that I've been meaning to have on for quite a while. She is the host of a podcast I've actually guested on a couple times that I'm sure quite a few of our patrons will be familiar with because it gets talked about sometimes in our Discord. She is the co-host of the Have You Seen This podcast, a podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media. So there is some crossover with some of the films that we like to talk about. You know, sometimes we get big and we talk West Side Story, but sometimes we want to talk about pieces of crap that someone made in their backyard for $1,000 at like their grandma's house or something like that. It happens sometimes. But that guest is Jennifer Albright. Jennifer, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
We're doing great. Thanks for
and
coming.
Hello to the audience.
Yes.
Yeah. This has been a long time coming. I mean, we've known about each other's podcasts for like since we started them.
Yeah,
and I think I guested with you guys in what, like 2019, 2018 even?
Yeah, there was a point in the pandemic year when we wanted to talk about how the pandemic was affecting the theatrical, the exhibition world. And I was like, hey, who's better qualified to talk about that than Josh? And we had a very good episode where we talked about how the pandemic was impacting theatrical showings and also Fox being owned by Disney and how that was going to... Actually, check that. I think it was pre-pandemic Now that I think
yeah,
about
I think it was. I think it was very late 2019. But yeah, we were concerned about that's just it. We were concerned about the theatrical model for art houses versus multiplexes, like before the pandemic happened, and all that shit has just heightened that essentially. But no, we had a really good talk about, and I was giving a little bit of insider information I probably wasn't supposed to be giving out. But yeah, there was a lot of really messed up shit going on behind the scenes around the time that Disney bought Fox, and the way that they were, overpricing and denying independent cinemas access to playing their films because they just didn't care. And I have heard a little bit of positive word on some of that, at least a little bit on rep screenings. It sounds like Disney and Fox have stopped doing what I was saying on the show was happening to us at the time, which was like, I was like, hey, can we book Point Break? And they were like, what's Point Break?
That's so nice to hear, because it feels like good news about the film industry is becoming rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
Yes. So some I've heard from some friends who are still working there that that it's becoming a little bit easier to book old Fox titles than it was when Disney first took over and just didn't even really have a rep arm. But I think it's partially because they didn't really have a rep catalog that they cared about. Fox has obviously a huge catalog. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we talked about that, and I also went on your show at one point to talk about the Baptist minister Estes Perkel, who is a not only a Baptist minister but a magician turned exploitation filmmaker who just tried to push really, really sort of radical Christian and anti-communist ideas through really nasty grindhouse stylization. And at some point we're going to cover him on our show as well. But yeah, so have you seen this podcast? I would recommend checking it out. They talk about cool stuff.
Yeah, I highly recommend that episode, because one of the things that we try to get across on our show is how we like to take a look back at certain, mostly movies, but also TV shows and things like that, and see how it led to where we are today. And that's definitely the case with The Burning Hell, where if you're at all interested in how the United States has gotten to the point it has, and you want to look at evangelical Christianity and how it has become more influential in the United States government, stuff like The Burning Hell is a good place to start. Because that movie was insanely popular for what it was. Much like another millenarian Christian piece, A Thief in the Night, which is also wild.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that one out. But Jennifer, as it goes, obviously on our show here, we have the guests bring the double feature with them. So what two films have you brought with you this week, and why do they pair together?
Well, this is an interesting one, because I believe initially I wanted to do a kind of William Peter Blatty double feature, but some bigwig, some really important guy called Mr. Will Miniker decided that he wanted to talk about Exorcist 3 on the show before I could get to it, because I wanted to do Ninth Configuration, which is one of my favorite movies, and Exorcist 3. But I got pipped at the post there by Will. So, I was thinking about the sort of genre trash that I usually wallow in. And I thought of a movie that I really enjoyed that I had seen a few years ago at the Metrograph in New York City. The Changeling, directed by Peter Medak, who also gave us The Ruling Class. Very good movie with George C. Scott, one of the scariest horror films you'll ever see. And I was like, well, what else can I put that with? Like, what kind of pairs? And I stumbled upon, on Tubi, the GOAT streaming service, superior to Netflix in every way. Tubi had The Sentinel, directed by your friend and mine, Michael Winner.
Woo, and, Michael Winner.
Yeah.
Goddamn.
And as it seemed to be about people in New York living over a hellmouth, I was like, okay, well, that fits. And in spite of my misgivings about it being a Michael Winner film, I viewed it and The Changeling, and so we have kind of the yin-yang horror pairing that you have for today's episode.
Yeah, I mean, both definitely, travel a little bit in kind of, sort of like that the 70s paranormal psychological thriller, post Exorcist, post The Omen. Sentinel's got a little bit more Polanski inspiration to it, whereas the Changeling, really leans into the spooky haunted house vibes in a way that the Sentinel gets a little bit more.
Baby.
The Sentinel definitely has Rosemary's Baby written all over it. It's actually so close that I think I called it a copycat because it very, very clearly the popularity of Rosemary's Baby had to have been like why they said, yeah, let's let Michael Winner try it.
Not as storied an address as the Dakota, but there are views overlooking Central Park.
Yes, definitely. But yeah, I'm excited. I hadn't seen either of these actually.
Me neither.
So I was very excited. And the Changeling I've been holding off on a while because I kind of knew that I was going to like it because just George C. Scott. I saw George C. Scott in it. I was like, okay,
it's so good.
Yeah, it's probably great. I was like, the only things I've seen.
It's a great performance from him. He's really good in it.
I like the only movies I've seen this man in are like Doctor Strangelove, Anatomy of a Murder, Exorcist 3, Hardcore. I'm like, this dude's like
he's
killer.
Just breaking down all the time.
Yeah,
man getting hit by football.
Yep. But yeah, that's going to be the double feature today, and I think we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start chronologically, I think, here. So let's kick it off with The Sentinel.
Burgess Meredith.
Welcome home.
And Christina Rains. The Sentinel. The most frightening motion picture experience of your life. And the most revealing. Turn around. Look behind you.
Be one with us.
There is evil everywhere. And the Sentinel is the only hope. The Sentinel.
All right, we are talking The Sentinel, the 1977 American supernatural horror film directed by Michael Winner and starring Christina Rains, Chris Sarandon, and an insane lineup of old Hollywood veterans, including...
This cast is stacked. It
is insane.
And
it actually is. Like Ava Gardner's in there,
almost.
Burgess Meredith is in there. Even like forgetting about the veterans as well, you even have like a young Christopher Walken, young Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, with like 2 lines.
Yeah, does Walken even talk? I actually wrote down that he didn't. Maybe I just missed his 2 lines.
I think he gets like a throwaway line with the detective at one point, I think.
Okay, because most of the time he's just looking good in the background.
Yeah, he's like lurking, and it's Christopher Walken is a strange choice to cast for someone who is basically a
detective
bit part player, because anytime Walken is on screen, I feel like even if you were watching this in like 1977 and you weren't familiar with him, your eyes would be going to this person in the background saying like, what is that guy's deal? Like he seems like the kind of...
seems more important.
Yeah, because, a lot of the time they'll do this in movies where someone will appear in a scene and you don't know what they're doing or why they're there. Maybe they're silent, but you know that they're going to figure into the plot later, and he doesn't.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I just kept seeing him, and I kept seeing the other cop that was played by what's his name? I think I've seen him in a couple other things, but regardless, he just kept going and kept doing the investigation, and I was just waiting
Eli
for
Wallach.
Walken to throw himself.
Oh yeah, it's
in
Eli
there.
Wallach from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Right.
Fucking
right.
Eli Wallach. Fucking Jose Ferrer. Fucking another alumnus of Lawrence of Arabia, Arthur Kennedy, playing an old ass
Martin
priest.
Balsam from Psycho and Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Martin fucking Balsam.
Crazy.
John Carradine.
Ava fucking Gardner.
Yeah, from The Killers. She's amazing. This cast is it is weird. It is just like for like no reason. Tiny roles that have just a couple lines are just played by like an entire who's who of a history of Hollywood cinema going back as far as John Carradine was in like the Universal monster films.
Right.
Yeah,
the guy who's playing the priest.
John Carradine, who I think was there for the birth of cinema, quite possibly.
Yes.
I mean, he was in movies with fucking Tyrone Power.
Yeah, that dude was in The Invisible Man and Bride of Frankenstein, and he was in like John Ford movies. Like he was in like the most classic westerns.
And then he became the undisputed king of schlock. Like I have seen him in more bottom barrel garbage than I can even describe. And
he was getting that bread.
Yeah, and God bless him. Kind of jumping off from the old Hollywood luminaries, like you already mentioned that there are also a lot of up-and-comers in this cast, including Christopher Walken. You've also got Jeff Goldblum, biographer. Yep. You have got at the
a
very
dubbed
end
over
of the
Jeff
movie,
Goldblum, which is really funny too.
Yeah, I thought so because he sounds. I was like, why are they looping his dialogue? Like, I know he can speak, but at the very end, there's a nice young couple looking for a new apartment, and it is they are played by Tom Berenger and
amazing.
Nana Visitor, billed as Nana Tucker. This is way before Deep Space Nine, so just like a wild amount of up and coming actors, including Chris Sarandon in a lead role.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this cast is really wild considering that this is a Michael Winner film. I want to reiterate the guy who, even at this time, was mostly known for his Charles Bronson films. And Michael Winner, it's worth noting, he is a bit of a hack. We've talked about him mostly on this show due to his work on the first 3 Death Wish movies, and we do really love his third one. Oh yeah. But I do think even on that episode, we kind of argued that it's almost accidentally great. It's like it's a perfect cartoon version of its filthy reactionary politics that is so unhinged that it almost just becomes a piece of autocritique. But between his trashy Charles Bronson collaborations, which there were a lot of, including things like The Mechanic, which was made before this, and that one that he did where he had Charles Bronson playing a native man. I don't remember exactly what that one's called, but I remember it not being very good when I saw it on TV. He did occasionally try to flex his muscles on other kinds of films, including he did a Western here or there, one called like Lawman. He did a noir, and he did take a couple stabs at horror with some I will say mixed results, because his issue primarily for me when I've gone to his films, and I do like Death Wish 3 the most, but a lot of his other ones are very kind of like mid to kind of bad for me, and mostly what I've seen across a lot of his movies is that he's just really not a very imaginative or stylish filmmaker, which I think is fine for action films, because sometimes for action films, especially in the 70s, you really just needed a basic, even clumsy competency and like a decent script, and you were kind of halfway there. But it is really hard to transition that over to horror, because the sense of style and mood is kind of 90% of what makes a horror film scary for you. And for example, the only other horror film I'd seen him make other than this was his movie called The Nightcomers, which I don't know if either of you have seen that.
No.
But it's really bad. And it is it is a prequel to the Turn of the Screw adaptation, The Innocents. About the plot is about the 2 ghosts who appear in that, but like the who used to like work on the property, and it's about their kind of sadomasochistic relationship that they've developed on the property. And the issue with that film is that it exists solely to make everything that was ambiguous and scary and moody about The Innocents as literal and dull as possible. He has no sense of mood for any of it. Like I watched it shortly after watching The Innocents, and I was like, this is like terrible. It's only sporadically of interest because old man Brando was in it for some reason, and he does get to play the Irish sadomasochistic freak property worker. So when he gets angry and violent, there are a couple moments where Brando is interesting to watch. But if Brando wasn't in it, it might have been one of the worst like 70s horror films I've seen.
Well, I would argue in this case that Michael Winner and company were visionaries, because they anticipated the 2021 trick of simply rebooting old intellectual property, like doing a shitty prequel about someone no one cares about, like explicating things that don't need to be explicated and slapping it up on streaming. So, good on you, Michael Winner. You were onto something. You were just ahead of your time there.
Yeah, it's the 70s Last Night in Soho.
There you go.
Yeah. And I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm cutting you off talking about.
No, go ahead.
Michael Winner's glorious and varied filmography. But
no, I was just about to move on to the Sentinel.
Yeah. I don't know. Am I poisoning the well by bringing this up? But I think I said this on Twitter yesterday after I watched The Sentinel. I said, every Michael Winner film I've ever watched has left me feeling dirty. Even ones that are enjoyable in a sick way, like Death Wish 3, which is one of the funniest movies of all time.
Oh, yeah.
So great.
Michael Winner is well known as a sleazebag, even among the crowded field of filmmaking.
Yes.
Noted scumbag, treated people terribly, treated actresses terribly in particular. Like, his misogyny just seems to ooze onto the screen with everything that he's ever made. And if have you seen this, listener, you know that we're not a show where we just cry misogyny at every negative depiction of a woman on screen. But with Michael Winner, it is really inescapable. And you can verify this just by talking to actresses who've worked with him. Most famously, probably Marina Sirtis, who most of you will know as Counselor Troy from Star Trek The Next Generation, but who appeared in a few of Michael Winner's works, such as Death Wish 3 and The Wicked Lady with Faye Dunaway, which I don't think anyone has seen.
No, I don't even know that.
But she has stories about how grotesquely he mistreated her. And in fact, when looking into things about the Sentinel, Christina Rains just really didn't have anything good to say about Michael Winner. I found an interview with her where she was extremely complimentary towards like most of the people that she worked with in her. She had I don't want to say like a short career, but she did about 20 years of acting and then retired from that to focus on her family. And I think she became a registered nurse. And she seems like a very gracious person, has very nice things to say about, Burgess Meredith, like, Chris Sarandon. Oh, he's the sweetest guy, blah, blah, blah. Michael Winner, like, just a terrible person. It's awful working with him. He was horrible to Ava Gardner. He didn't even want to light her properly. And Ava Gardner, like, why are you trying to make Ava Gardner look like shit? And it is hard to make Ava Gardner look like shit. I mean, like in Showboat, where she's the scenes where she's supposed to be like, aged and worn and run down, and she still looks like a goddess because she's Ava Gardner. And in The Sentinel, she looks like just old and puffy. Like, the Ava Gardner-ness is still coming through, but it's like, why are you doing this? And he also does it to Christina Rains because she is, and I realize that she's playing a character who is, she's beset by supernatural forces and she is very ill in certain parts of the movie, but like he made her look like absolute dog shit. And this is a woman who's supposed to be playing a model. I don't know. Did I just kill the show just with my Michael Winner rant? Because it's just, there's so much there. I don't know. There's so much nastiness in this movie, and it really just seems to ooze.
Yeah,
from the director.
I think that Winner definitely has a nasty streak in him, and I think that there's some stuff in this that is very questionable. We'll get into some of like the some of the details of specifically for me some of the ways that he used, for example, like what the demons are kind of up to in this film.
Yeah, like
was
for
just like
Michael.
strange.
For Michael Winner, you know what he finds creepy? Lesbians, old people, and the disabled.
Yeah.
Literally demons from
exactly
hell.
that was what I thought was so funny, was that like the sudden last minute twist it tries to pull kind of at the end, where it involves a little bit of a priest and a gate to hell and all of this, and it turns out that it really is just a bunch of old character actors and literally disabled people that he found at the hospital, just like walking around, having birthday parties for their cats, having gay sex. This is like the most troubling thing to him, which I was just definitely, I was like, that is a very strange depiction of the gates of hell, considering we've talked about movies that have done things like that before, like someone like Lucio Fulci. which is, you know, it's much more distressing to watch like these, you know, the makeup work that he does on some of those, you know, sort of zombie creatures, and the level of extreme violence he has, like that gunshot to the little girl's head that just like explodes it, and, you know, the kind of painterly depiction of hell versus this, which is just kind of they actually don't really show much of it. It's just kind of the brownstone. So I don't know. It's interesting, but this is in basic premise. I found this, you know, definitely just trying to pick up on trends at the time. Came out in 1977. It came out post Repulsion, post Rosemary's Baby, post The Exorcist, post The Omen, and you can basically see all four of those films in some way or another in here.
Yes.
And also, I was interested to find out that it was co-written by the guy who did, Jamie, you might remember this, Silent Night, Bloody Night in 1972. Which we did as one of the virtual screenings. I think we might have even done that last December when we were looking for kind of like a creepy sort of wintry
I think it
kind
was
of horror film. And yeah, that movie predates Black Christmas and has like moody wide angle POV stalker sequences in it, and it has like these really extended sort of like sort of insane silent era looking nightmare flashbacks and stuff in it. So you can definitely sense a little bit of that dude's haunted, spooky surrealism in the premise of this film. And then you just have it directed by someone like Winner, who I'm just like is a little bit flat and surprisingly doesn't wring as much tension out of this scenario as I kind of hoped that he would. All I could think about this was that this is about a house sitting on top of the gates of hell, and we have already covered the entire Gates of Hell trilogy by Lucio Fulci. And I was sitting there going, this movie and its premise are literally just begging for an Italian horror film guy from the 70s to just, you know, pump this up with, you know, with some more erotic elements, with some more unhinged surreal elements. And, you know, Winner just doesn't kind of have the dread-inducing mood. You really do kind of feel that this is just a bit of a copycat of, you know, popular psychological, paranormal horror films of the 70s.
I also feel
I'm sorry. I was just going to say the Italians do not fuck around when it comes to truly unsettling sleazy horror.
No.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah, they go all out. That's basically what I was just about to say. It was like I was watching this and thinking, if Fulci or someone like him directed this, I really do feel it would be elevated, regardless of kind of the gross ideas that come along with this. You know, I guess I don't know. Is it Catholic? I think, right? They go to the Catholic.
Yes.
So obviously there's some gross themes that are going to pop up, such as like we were saying, some of the horror elements are just anti-gay. It just seems like
Winner definitely gets the most scared making this film when that woman just starts masturbating.
Right.
Beverly D'Angelo.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
another
the thing
up and comer.
Like, I'm watching it, and obviously that situation would be uncomfortable. That was
it's definitely awkward, of course.
But it's just that he's painting it as this like incredibly dreadful, horrifying scene. Like, Allison's reacting in a very horrifying way, and I couldn't help but just kind of chuckle a little bit. Now, I was sitting there. Of course, I get that Allison would be uncomfortable with that situation, but it's just the way that he presents it is a little over the top. And he does that throughout the film. There are a couple moments here that I saw that were cool, though. I just wish that he focused more on them. Like there's a moment where, well, maybe we should get to more of the plot first. Basically, this woman, Allison, seems to have kind of like some past trauma based on her walking in on her dad having a threesome with two
overweight women.
Yes.
It's worth
Frolicking
noting.
with cake nymphs.
Which is the scariest thing in the world.
Yes, yeah. And she just goes crazy about it and goes into the bathroom and starts abusing herself because of it. And so right
She doesn't
away,
even know how to cut her wrist properly, though. It's down the road, not across the street, you dumb Catholic bitch.
And so... so
I love that the women are also stuffing their faces with cake just to emphasize that they are gluttonous.
Just cake and sex, baby. That's
You're
what
completely
he was afraid of.
They're completely unbothered too. Like, obviously the dad is, distressed and pissed off that his daughter has walked in on his cake orgy, but they're just kind of like, because that's what fat bitches are like. They're just, cramming cake into their face and like laughing. And then they also, visions of them also appear at the end, also emphasizing the point that, fat profligate women are, again, like the disabled, literal demons from hell.
Yeah. And I think what he was trying to do is do the whole, like, 7 sins thing. So it's like, gluttony, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is the way he presents them just comes off as very much like, these big ladies, aren't they scary? And you're just kind of like, no, man, you got to have more than that. There's got to be more thought and imagery to that. So,
well, yeah, because for Winter, like, there's an 8th deadly sin, which is ugliness.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
I will say that
yeah.
stuff, when he gets ugly, that was the time in terms of the directing that I was the most intrigued by the film. Because at the very least, that has a little bit of a pulse to it, even if obviously you disagree with what he finds scary. He is trying as a director to scare you in those moments, whereas a lot of the rest of the film is like kind of a procedural, right? It's kind of
a
little bit.
I was going to say, like, I wish the movie focused on the pure surreal aspects of Allison's perspective, because I just think that one, that was the most intriguing part, and two, you would just settle yourself into the horror aspects more, because every time it would go back to the cops or her boyfriend Michael, I was just kind of like, I don't care. It's not the story that I'm engaged with right now. I understand that you have to do a little bit of that historical research so that you can find out why the building is the way it is and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think you have to have such a hyper focus on it. And I really think those tonal changes were not a good choice.
No, well, and you know what's more interesting too is that, and part of the issue I had a little bit, but also part of what some of the stuff that I liked about it too is that the supporting cast is just much more fun to watch than the lead couple is, which is kind of like kind of an issue. Like for me, I think that Allison, and Christina Rains, I think that they definitely are walking around the more horror sequences, which are obviously fun.
Yeah.
But I found most of the stuff with Chris Sarandon to be really dull, considering the fact that by the end of the film, it is revealed that he, they kind of tease it out that there's like this little bit that, his previous wife killed herself and that he might have been the one to like kill her because she wouldn't get a divorce from him or something like that. And they kind of tease that out. But you don't actually, see him be kind of skeezy or particularly slimy in any way.
It could have been interesting because, I don't think that Michael Winter is really capable of doing ambiguity. I believe he and I'm forgetting the author's name, but he collaborated on this screenplay with the author of the book, The Sentinel, which I have not read. I've heard from horror enthusiasts that it's actually like a pretty good book.
It seems from I read the just the basic plot, and it seems to be pretty similar too. So I wonder if maybe just the details are scarier in between.
Well, yeah, because apparently,
so the guy who wrote Silent Night, Bloody Night is this author then too. That's interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the guy knows horror, right? He was very displeased with the direction that that Winter took the film in. They had pretty significant disagreements on the script, and I realize that most authors end up fairly discontented with what appears on the screen from their work. It's pretty common, but I'm kind of inclined to give his opinion some weight here. And going back to the point I was initially making, there is a certain ambiguity to Chris Sarandon's character Michael, who is a lawyer. Christina Rains, Allison, they're a very nice golden New York couple.
He's a lawyer. She's a fashion model who,
she's
in the opening of the film, is doing
very
these
successful
montages
model.
of her in Central Park and on the cover of magazines and riding her bike around the city and just it's almost like a travelogue montage.
Yeah, they have a very nice life. You know, the views of Central Park, everything. They're a golden couple. They're very attractive. They seem to love each other quite a bit.
They move into an apartment in a scene that almost directly resembles the Cassavetes and Farrow apartment tour from Rosemary's Baby, which was a bad comparison to make, because then it just doubled down on my opinion of the Chris Sarandon character being boring, because I was like, man, Cassavetes is so filthy in that movie, and when it is eventually revealed that he's obviously literally selling his girlfriend's body to the devil for success in the city and stuff, like that stuff is really impactful. And I was sitting here going, man, this movie needed something like that for Chris Sarandon.
That's absolutely what I was getting at, because there is you're totally correct to say that, because this could have been interesting from a filmmaker maybe with a lighter touch or like a better script, because Chris Sarandon is very likable on the surface. He is extremely concerned and solicitous about his girlfriend. But there could plausibly be like you could get a sense of like ulterior motives, and those do come across a little bit, because it's like, okay, well, this guy's a lawyer, but he seems to be a little bit shady, but he's really nice to his girlfriend. But like, oh, I don't know, maybe he killed his first wife. But oh man, he's like so concerned about Allison, like he really deeply cares about her. And then at the end of the movie, it's just like, oh yeah, like I killed my first wife, and I'm damned
now
to hell.
I'm in hell.
Come to hell with me.
Right.
And
they should have explored it a little more.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I definitely hit that twist, and I was like, man, that would have been interesting to see that like actually in the character, like the fact that he was a murderer.
Yeah, because like trying to
like cover it up almost or something.
Yeah, like to go back to Rosemary's Baby, Polanski is problematic fave. Like a tremendously gifted filmmaker. He plays a lot with the ambiguity of Rosemary's predicament in Rosemary's Baby. Like, is she insane, or is she literally getting raped by the devil? That kind of thing. There's no ambiguity in the Sentinel. It's like, oh yeah, has to build over Hellmouth. Like, Allison's going to become the guardian of the Hellmouth. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're going. Like, there's no real psychological subjectivity apart from the fact that people tell her like, oh, those people in the building don't actually live there.
Mm-hmm. Right, and some of the attempt at trying to do a Polanski-esque sort of surreal sequencing when she actually is, with the whole thing with the house sometimes shaking or making noises, or some of the strange ghost characters that she's interacting with. We don't find out until like 45 minutes in that they are supposed to be ghost characters, which is why you don't quite engage with it on that level.
No,
I was
man,
kind of surprised that it took that long.
You know what's really fucked up? A birthday party for a cat. Like, that's fucking scary, dude. Like, I don't know what you think, but I'd be like, whoa, like, this is too much for me, man.
And I was like, no, Burgess Meredith, I always think of him as Mickey from Rocky. I was like, this is just cute. Cute.
And I mean, they introduce him too with like a Sylvester and Tweety Bird essentially on his shoulder when he first meets them.
Named Mortimer and Jezebel.
Yes, and I also think that it's kind of, once again, it's got this thing where obviously it's an uncomfortable image in a way, but it's still more funny than horrific. And that's when after the party, she starts to have that like the vision where she's not sure if it was a dream or not, and she sees them all naked, and one of them is like hitting cymbals together in front of her face or whatever. Yeah, and
an opportunity to look at Beverly D'Angelo's admittedly very nice breasts.
Yes.
If you were anticipating them in National Lampoon's Vacation, well, here's a little preview.
Yeah. And then I think the most they really do when it comes to like, is she crazy or not kind of thing, is when she brings in like the real estate agent to show her that like she went to a party here last night and the room is empty and there's cobwebs all over it. And it's
that was when the movie kind of picked up for me a little bit. During the early scenes, like the first half of the movie, I was trying to figure out like what exactly was like scary about the movie. And then when they said that they were all ghosts and they actually start kind of using that, and then, they do get some sequences where they put some makeup on them. They kind of ugly them up a little bit. There's a part where she's like, literally stabbing someone and chopping someone's nose off and
dad,
shit like that.
which I thought was, that's one of the sequences.
The corpse of her dad too.
Yeah, I thought that sequence was actually well done. It's one of the ones that stands out to me just because I really liked she walks through this very dark hallway and she sees the cat like eating the Tweety bird. And then she walks into the room, and out of the darkness in a shadow that you can't see right away, the dad just starts to walk out of the shadow. And it kind of did give me a little bit of a jolt. And he's designed like he's dead looking. So he's got, pale face.
Yeah,
he's got some
pale,
green,
yeah.
I don't know, slime or goop or something all over him. And he's also
Yeah,
very tall and lanky. And he's in his underwear.
Yeah.
So it just gives this kind of strange, bizarre quality to it. And him coming out of the shadows, I thought was really effective.
Yeah, that bit is what I was going to say. Like the wide shot of her opening the door and coming through the lit door into the dark room and him being just behind the door.
Yeah, really
and
good.
Then like moving his way out. So there are a couple, like that was for me when he finally started achieving the kind of ugliness that I think he wanted to. Like it has a couple sort of late 70s kind of like gore shocks to it.
Yeah, and it needed more
that
than
again. Yeah, well, just comparing this to other films of its era, especially coming out of Italy, I was definitely going, man, he could have upped that a little bit. But I appreciated that it was there.
And I do think the knife, like the slicing of his arm, and I think she stabs him one time as well, was pretty effective. Like it's a good slice. The blood, it's dripping down his arm and stuff. So the effects are pretty gross. I just, once again, it's very few and far between. I just thought there should be a little bit more of that. Yeah, that too. Yep. So
yeah,
comes up a little short in that department, but there's still enough here that I still kind of liked the movie overall.
I mean, it kind of goes back to just Michael Winner as a director, where it's like he has a workman-like understanding of what puts across a movie to an audience. Like that comes across in Death Wish. You can disagree with the kind of intrinsic fascism of the original Death Wish, but the brutality of the filmmaking kind of sells it. But in this case, definitely. He has a general idea of what's scary. It's just that he's not he doesn't finesse it. And like as you mentioned, there are all these certain scenes that work very well in creating like a terrifying mood, like her father emerging from the shadows, his corpse like shambling at her. It's like, okay, that's fucking scary. I'll give you that.
Yeah, and reminding her of obviously walking in on him having his orgy and trying to kill herself and take her own life. And
it's more layered than just like, oh, look at this gross thing. But not to jump ahead too much, but to compare it to the following movie that we're going to talk about, The Changeling, in which every shot inside the house is laden with menace. Yeah, there's just no comparison.
Yep. Agreed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
agree
100% agree.
The tones and the atmosphere is just much better in The Changeling.
There's no consistency to this, right? There's like those moments do have a little bit of sort of like psychological stress or confusion or kind of weight to them in the character experience, but it's so crazy how little he does that. And how it really just kind of comes up. I wish there was more of the ugly hysteria stuff that he occasionally gets to in this film, but there is a lot of that is just very flat, very procedural minded kind of like mystery element that eats up so much of the film. Again, it takes 45 minutes before you even know that these are ghosts. And there's a little bit in the filmmaking that makes it a little off-putting. Again, some of the strange close-ups on Michael Burgess's face as he's being a little bit too friendly. When she goes into the lesbian's apartment and they just start masturbating in front of her, and what do they say? What do we do for a living? We fondle each other. Despite the fact that the idea, despite the fact that the idea behind it is stupid, you can tell that Winner is trying to shoot it a little bit psychologically engaging, and with how she's like staring at her, and sort of the intensity of some of the score that kicks in and stuff like that.
Well, and a lot of that
get a little
comes
bit of her
from
experiencing it at work too. with her like fainting everywhere, like on the set. I did wish that there was a little bit more of her. Like the director kind of is very upset with her that it takes her 11 takes to put that bottle down correctly.
That's right. Little side note about, I guess he was pretty well known as a Broadway actor at the time. This is way before Law and Order, but Jerry Orbach is the angry director on the set of the wine commercial.
Okay.
And, watching that scene, you can't, and, if you listen to our show, have you seen this? You know that we try to be fair to the people who work on these movies, maybe not always assume the worst of them without evidence, but it's really hard not to watch that scene and not see Michael Winner kind of working out his frustrations about like having to work with actresses, the way it's going to take
Models.
14 takes to put down the fucking bottle right. It's like it does make your skin crawl a little bit. And one thing that I want to make clear, like if I finally shut my fucking trap for 1 minute and let you guys continue, I want to make at least this clear. Like if you listen to our show, like you will find that we try to be fair to the people working on movies. We try not to leap to conclusions about negative intent on the part of filmmakers. It's become like a very easy knee-jerk thing to do hot takes about how, everyone in Hollywood is a misogynist, racist, abuser, and, all the things they depict on screen are evidence of that. On Have You Seen This, we talk about a lot of movies which could be framed as problematic, but we try to engage with the quote-unquote problematic material and realize that sometimes art must depict ugliness and trauma in order to engage with these things that happen in real life.
We're right there with you.
Yeah, like we're big I'm the big Von Trier fan. Tim has qualms about Von Trier, but we both love, for example, Antichrist, a movie which pissed a lot of people off.
As part of our weekly virtual group watch that we do as friends, I just made Jamie watch Dogville for the first time.
Oh yeah, that was a time.
And Tim really didn't care for Dogville, but he loved the follow-up Manderley, which
interesting.
Another movie,
seen that one.
But it's like I can't really say it seems redundant to say about Von Trier, like, oh, that movie pissed a lot of people off. It's what he does, but again, we try to engage with what the filmmaker is trying to put across without assuming bad intent. But in the case of Michael Winner, like I said, every movie that I've watched by him makes me feel dirty.
And I do think there's something. I imagine, I don't know, that Winner is probably. I don't know if it'd be Catholic, but he comes from some sort of Christian background, I imagine. So when he presents things that he's frightened of the way he does in this movie, as silly as they can be to me, there still is kind of an effective thing about watching him put his fears on the screen, even though I find them kind of silly. And so I think that's where I was also engaged with this film, regardless of the fact that I disagree a lot with Winner. It like even the stuff at the end when he starts to use the deformed people as a representation of hell, I definitely I want to think that he's mostly saying it's like the physical weight that would bring would be a hell in itself, but he's also unfortunately bringing forth like being disabled or mutated in some way is evil. And that is where it gets,
and it
obviously,
is kind of monstrous in a way, which I find definitely a troubling idea. But yes. I'll agree with you in the sense that I do think that Michael Winner, the way that he shoots it, he does try to highlight in a very, I guess you could call it a mean or a cruel way, but he does try to highlight the ugliness of it.
Right, exactly.
Which is maybe a problem in and of itself. But the filmmaking, I will agree, has there's a little bit of life to that more so than some of the more boring elements of the film. I almost wished he could just go full unabashed ugly. Just say everything that you're, maybe hinting at visually quietly. Just say it, man.
Yeah.
Just go all out. Just make an Estes Perkle film.
Yeah, and obviously this is really dense territory to get into, like everything that is implied about how we as humans like perceive the disabled and the disfigured, like what makes us uncomfortable. And I don't think that it's wrong to confront that, to really go ahead and make the audience uncomfortable. But I think in the hands of a more thoughtful filmmaker, you would have something which is asking the audience, like, why does this make you feel uncomfortable? Like, why? Like why? These are human beings. Yes, that's exactly because the
Freaks is great.
The whole thing about Freaks is that, like, yes, it's forcing you to look at these people, but not merely as objects of ugliness. These are these are people with inner lives. Instead of
you are
demons.
totally sympathetic to their feelings, especially when they do get to the point where they do the monstrous violence that you're there to watch them do. You totally understand where it's coming from by the end you watch that film. Whereas here you can tell it's literally just the visual shock factor. He's like, wouldn't that be gross?
Yes, that's right, because we're not seeing a community of the disabled. We're seeing representations of like demonic demons, forces, not even human.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and all part of some sort of like church conspiracy thriller where the church is actually the good guys, which would also surprise me, because in most movies, even at this time, even something like The Exorcist, which I think people sometimes interrogate as like a, unquestionably with the church at every moment. It's just like, there's a little bit more ambiguity there, especially with the way that the individual characters reckon with their own faith and, the institution and stuff like that as well. In this, I was like, it's very funny. It traffics in the image that there's a creepy priest who lives in the attic who's blind. And I did like the recurring image of her constantly looking up at the attic and he's just staring out there even though he can't see anything. She's like, what is he fucking looking at? And,
I love
kind of stuff.
And I love the subtle way.
The twist being that they are the good guys there to stop the lesbians and disabled people was the funniest twist.
I didn't mind that much because we are already like in this kind of like Catholic fear sphere. So I didn't mind that it was a good versus evil thing by the end. And I did kind of like even that the church, in order to do this, has to take some person and just sit them in front of a window and guard the building for eternity, blind and staring off into whatever, a void of some kind.
And there's a little bit about how they try to they have to force people to commit suicide in order to replace the previous people who are like aging.
Yeah, right.
Well,
there's some sort
demons,
of church conspiracy there.
The demons are the one trying to make her commit suicide, because then if she takes her own life, she's going to be damned to hell forever.
Right. But instead, she takes the place of the priest so that she can guard the gates of hell instead. And
like going back to the just really quickly to the John Carradine, the blind priest, the actual sentinel. It pretty much sums up like how like subtle a movie this is, with a line that Allison has where she says, after the real estate agent has explained that, he's blind, but he just sits in front of the window all day, and then Allison says something like, he's blind, but then what does he look at? It's like, you got it. That's very weird. Yeah.
I wonder if that'll come into play later. Yeah, for sure. A bit of a lack of subtlety for sure. It's not Wimmer's strong suit.
No.
But I will say I got a little bit out of the climax, because again I was a little bit by the time the climax hit, there's stuff that's really silly about it and kind of campy about it that I just kind of sat back and went, okay, at least this is a movie.
Yeah, this is fun.
Because in some of the earlier parts, when it does, you know, move over to the cop's point of view, and when it does move over to Chris Sarandon's point of view, as they're literally just like
doing boring things. Investigative shit.
Well, and doing like really unnecessary exposition too, like parts where he's just like, okay, you go back home and I'm gonna translate this Latin, and we're gonna find out what this Latin says. And
just put it into Google Translate, bro.
Literally just so that they could incorporate Martin Balsam and have him be the Latin professor who is just like, this says something about how someone is guarding and watching this place of evil. Do you know anything about this? It's a quote from Paradise Lost, if you haven't heard that quote before.
Very obscure work.
Yeah. And then literally the next scene is him like getting her the book.
Yeah.
So like stuff like that, I was definitely like more kind of like rolling my eyes out a little bit, where I was like, okay, this is in terms of the writing and in terms of just the two main characters being a little generic and kind of broad, and some of the actual mystery and investigative elements just being kind of not particularly interesting or tense, which will hit especially when we talk about the Changeling, because I'd say the opposite is true in that film.
Constantly.
Yes.
The actual mystery element is even off-putting and uncomfortable, as he's even doing something as simple as like researching something in the library. You know, the character subjectivity even dominates scenes that otherwise might be boring in that film. Yeah. And it was just such an easy compare and contrast, where like Winter just doesn't have the sense to do that for those scenes. But I was relieved when, you know, eventually he does get to the big conspiracy about, you know, how they're trying to get Allison to kill herself so that she won't become the next Sentinel, who is the church's sort of person that they put at this gate of hell to make sure that these demons, you know, don't actually escape the house. Because as we found out, there's no one living in this house. None of these supporting character actors actually live here. They are all just demons trying to be free, despite the fact that the most that they're doing is like, again, throwing birthday parties for their cats or having sex, and you know, like that. They're really not even looking like they're trying to escape. Really, they're just kind of hanging out.
I feel like Carradine as Father Haller in The Blind Sentinel is falling down on the job a little bit if he's not letting the church elders know, like, hey, you know, like, okay, like, I don't want you guys to freak out yet, because the gate still has its integrity. Like, you know, no, it's not broken, but it is leaking a little bit.
Might want to get it fixed, you know?
Yeah.
Call a plumber. We need to.
Heavenly plumber.
This thing's leaking demons.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. He probably could have done a little bit better at his bodyguard job.
Yeah. Well, you know, the dear man, he's trying. He's blind.
He's been there for a while, probably. You know, he's tired. I get it.
I mean, he's John Carradine. He's 800 years old.
But they do eventually kill the Chris Sarandon character, and there are a couple like horror images where like his blood is like dropping from the ceiling onto her dress, and she comes upstairs, and the lesbians aren't just having sex anymore; they're like cannibalizing
eating his flesh.
Her. Yeah.
And laughing, of course.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
they're laughing at every scene, no matter what.
Yeah, like the profligate femininity in this movie is really something.
Yeah, and God bless Burgess Meredith, who is the only one who gets to really go off as like kind of playing a demon.
Yes.
Right. Where he actually gets to kind of explain everything about, you know, what has happened as the demons, who are, as we mentioned, literally just disabled people that Winter found at hot local hospitals.
I hope they got like a decent day rate. I mean,
yeah. But yeah, so it was very funny watching. What is it? It's Burgess being like, you are chosen by our Lord Tyrant, and you must destroy yourself to be one with us. It's literally just like Mickey from Rocky trying to like coax a woman into suicide.
You gotta go all the way.
Yeah.
Kill yourself.
Yeah. that stuff I found very, very fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too. Really, anytime he pops up, even when he's being like the innocent, funny little old man with Tweety Bird and Sylvester, I got a kick out of it. I mean, it's not scary. He's not really uneasy or anything like that, but he's just charming
he's got
cute.
screen presence. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to the outrageously stacked cast. It's like you have a lot of like really
They do a lot of heavy lifting on
actors.
this, I think,
Like working with relatively weak material and making like quite a bit out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're definitely chewing that that scenery. And yeah, then literally Carradine and the other priest kind of come in and are basically being like, "Don't kill yourself. Resist killing yourself.
Become the
guard us
sentinel."
against evil." If you guard us against evil, your doom that you are already going to be under for attempting to commit suicide earlier in your life will be forgiven, which I thought was a really dark detail.
Well, it is strange that her trade-off is either burn in hell or sit in this chair for all eternity and guard this building. Like, both of them seem pretty shitty.
Well, that's kind of
the movie takes at face value the Catholic idea that obviously suicide is a sin.
Right.
And honestly, like, that was pretty much like the opportunities that were available for women in the church at the time. Not a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she does agree that she will take the spot of the John Carradine. She will become the Sentinel. The demons start like bleeding and screaming and kind of backing out of the room, and she gets to sit guarding in the attic where the priest used to. I did like the detail that they kind of like demolish the house and replace it with a condo building.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now she's the recluse nun next door, looking out over the New York City skyline, the same way that when she rented out the place, they were telling her about the reclused priest, blind priest who was doing the same. So, they kind of thought out the climax and the ending well enough that I was able to, I think, overall end up kind of enjoying myself with this one, and maybe pivoting towards reductive rating round. I do think that this is kind of on the lower end of threes for me.
Nice.
I think that in terms of many of its ideas and its direction, it is silly in a bad way and then silly in a fun way. And I would argue too that it kind of looks okay. Like, there's some nice New York City
I think it looks
like
good.
location backdrop to it, and some of the lavish apartments and churches and brownstones that they chose. And I do like going back to movies like this from the 70s where you get all those great little zooms, and there were, to Winter's credit, a couple sequences that were not necessarily creepy, but were effectively ugly. Even if I disagree what was ugly about them, they were ugly and violent and kind of weird enough that I got something out of it. Especially some of the surreal elements where I just wish there was more of it. That's ultimately my main
me
issue
too.
is that I watched this and I went, man, this premise really just does need an Italian horror filmmaker who would have went, oh, who fucking cares about the boyfriend and the cops?
Yeah.
Let's just take these sequences of Allison going insane because let's reiterate what the premise is here. These demons are trying to scare her into killing herself.
Yes.
It's like that doesn't like they're. I was like, where are the scenes where the demons are like putting on little shows? They're doing like set dressing and like being like, let's really scare the shit out of her and make her kill herself. Let's go crazy. Like, I was just wondering like how that wasn't what the movie was about, and instead it was about this mystery that you kind of see coming 40 minutes before the movie's even over.
Yeah, and
it's a little too flat and procedural minded for me ultimately. I also found the score extremely corny, which is a weird note to bring up at the last second. But I thought that all the string orchestra stuff was just signaling just the most obvious things in the world, and I was definitely like, I've heard some of these exact compositions in other movies before.
Well,
and I remember that's not usually a note that I pick up on, and I was just weirded out by that in this.
No, yeah, it definitely has that. And this was a little bit of a. This tended to happen a lot in the 70s, where you would have like kind of a busy, obtrusive score. Like, there was still a tendency to be a little bit, at least in kind of more like big studio films, they were still a little bit afraid of just letting things play out on screen without kind of trying to telegraph the intent to the viewer. This score is by Gil Mele, who also did soundtracks for The Andromeda Strain and a personal cornball favorite of mine, Starship Invasions, which is one of the funniest alien invasion movies that you will ever have the pleasure to see. And he does, again, like a very busy, obtrusive score for that film, but the movie is so bonkers it kind of works. Here it just tends to drown the action.
Yeah, I definitely found that as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would agree. Even there was one part in like where I think it's where she's being shown the house, and there's some like kind of subtle, I don't know if it was synths or like bells or something that I thought was okay, but that's the only thing. And it really was just a very subtle tone setter. It's nothing like, the melody isn't memorable or anything like that. So
Well, and I feel like it came off poorly for me because I felt like it was trying to do the work that some of the images just weren't, like during the procedural elements. Like it was trying to be like, isn't this creepy? But like nothing else about the film was creepy. So it might not even be the score's fault. It might just be that it really just didn't blend well with some of the images. And it also occurred to me too, just because we'll get to it, but in comparison with The Changeling, which I thought had an incredible score.
Yes.
yeah.
Agree.
Solid enough premise that it kind of carries, I think, Winter's clumsy filmmaking. But yeah, so low 3 for me.
Yeah, I'd give it a 3. I agree with everything. I do think that if we had somebody like Fulci behind this thing, it would be elevated to something that I'd really, really love. It just needed more surreal elements. It needed to take away most of, if not all, of the procedural cop stuff. I think just focusing on Allison was really the move that should have been done here, because any kind of horror sequence with her, although at times definitely more silly than horrifying, are still more interesting. Just through the images, through the thoughts themselves of the scenes. I just think that they're much better than anything with Michael or the cops. So he really needed to focus on those surreal aspects of it. So yeah, and I do think like the way that he presents the deformed people at the end, the way he's presenting them is very ugly. It's not. I don't think it's the way that he should have went about it, but I get what he's trying to get across, and the imagery itself is still kind of effective. It is gross. It will make you feel a little disgusted. So it seems to be unavoidable for Wimmer, honestly. Just watching the Death Wish movies and then watching this now, I just think this is what he has on his mind. So it is what it is, I guess. But you know, I still think that there's some cool horror elements with like her basically being forced to sacrifice herself with one way or the other. Either she becomes this nun forever that just guards the gates of hell and can't talk, is just blindly looking into the void and guarding it, or she kills herself and becomes a demon. And to be honest, the way that it presents itself in this movie, it'd almost be better if she became a demon, because they get to eat cake and have sex. So I think that it seems a lot better than just
the demons
looking
are
out a
having
window.
a lot more fun.
Yeah, they're winning.
Yeah.
I think they're winning in this movie. But I get
and they're all played by wonderful supporting character actors that you would rather hang out with, I think, too.
Yeah, definitely. But I get what he's trying to say. I do like the like Catholic fears that are on screen here. Being growing up Catholic, it was just kind of interesting to see those fears on screen, and I do like seeing that, even if I disagree with it now.
I would just way rather see this kind of struggle with Catholic morality and theology from William Peter Blatty or someone like that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
If he was behind this, it would be a lot better and a lot more well thought out.
Because I am
honestly.
not. Yeah, I'm lapsed Catholic and not at all spiritual. I'm an atheist, and I still find a lot that's really fascinating to grapple with in Blatty's work, because, you know, like in Ninth Configuration or Exorcist 3 or even the original Exorcist, you know, he's definitely struggling with the questions that come along with faith, and even as a relative outsider, that's fascinating to see.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, and Winter just he I don't think he's capable of just thinking that deeply about these themes. I don't think he can hold a candle to Blatt. So I Yeah, this is going to be a 3.
He's like, aren't old people just like creepy looking? That's like
that's like it.
The extent of it.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
aren't lesbians just unnatural and grotesque? Don't they creep you out?
Oh man. So yeah, I think it's still a 3 because I am intrigued by a couple of these thoughts here, and I do like some of the imagery, but it's definitely not Wimmer that was the guy that could elevate this material. So yeah, leave it at that.
Yeah. For you, Jen.
Well, I'll confess, after watching this, I immediately went over to Letterboxd and angrily gave it, I think, 1.5 stars. I may go back and change that because I don't know. I'm going to give it a solid. Is your guys' rating 5 stars or 4?
Out of 5.
Out of 5.
Out of 5. Yeah. Okay, so out of 5, I got to give it. I'll give it a 2. I know I'm being harder on it than you guys, but for me, like a solid.
That was why I said low 3.
Yeah,
I was kind of like, this kind of just barely got there for me because I, just from some of the intriguing stuff of the premise. But yeah, no, totally understand.
And Catholic stuff just always does it for me because of my background. So that's where the 3 comes from for me.
And this is probably indicative of like the kind of movies that I watch, which are either like I'll sit down and watch a stone masterpiece or utter trash. So sometimes it's hard for me to place like the more middle movies, but for me to give this movie a 3, I would have to have been like it doesn't work, but like I enjoyed it. And for me, it's like it doesn't work. I did not have a good time watching it. Like I've seen better treatments of this kind of material where you can say like, well, the people who made this were really earnestly trying, as opposed to, just being a sort of workman-like director, like who basically grasps what you need to put into a feature, but is just going to kind of try to shit it out on film and not really explore anything like that wilder or interesting. I feel like a really major screw up with this film is like, you guys were pointing out, not making Allison the central character. And I believe that
or even if you're not going to do that, like at least ugly up the procedural elements. Like it's not like Italian horror filmmakers don't do procedural stuff. We just did Bird with the Crystal Plumage recently, which was like huge procedural. Yeah. But it's like even getting into the subjectivity of the boyfriend who is a killer. Mm-hmm. Like where is that part of the movie?
Yeah.
Where that
seems pretty essential, especially by the end.
Yeah, and there is, and I know not to sound like woke SJW takes are ruining movies, because like I don't really believe that, but there is a tendency to really be negative about how women are portrayed on screen. And I don't think it's a bad thing for a female character to be relatively weak or passive, because there are weak and passive people that you encounter every day. Sure. But Allison should be the protagonist. She should be a little more. She's a modern 70s woman. She has her own career. She's she's very much in love with her boyfriend, but she's like, no, like I want to get my own place. I don't want to get married right away. And then the supernatural attacks that she's under just reduce her to like someone who's completely passive in her own narrative, which is a huge weakness of the film. So yeah, fuck you, Michael Winner. 2 stars. Rest in piss.
Damn.
God damn. Well, I will say to your point on that, it is pretty crazy that like we can see someone like Polanski, who has obviously done terrible things, and even he gives his female protagonists, I think, a little bit more to do and more agency in the films that they were, directly stealing from.
Definitely.
It's beyond me how he could, like, he made Repulsion, which is absolutely a movie about a woman, recycling like horrible trauma, and he's a person who inflicts that trauma on women, and he has a better understanding of this than Michael Winner. It blows my goddamn mind.
Yeah, that is like genuinely crazy. But yeah, I think that will wrap it up here for The Sentinel. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about The Changeling.
What is it you want? What do you want from me? Many films will frighten you, but only a few can really terrify you. The Changeling, an experience beyond total fear.
All right, we are back, and we are talking The Changeling, the 1980 Canadian supernatural psychological horror film, directed by one Peter Medic, and starring George C. Scott, obviously, who we've talked about a couple times on this show. I think mostly, actually, maybe just once. Have we only done The Exorcist 3?
Yeah, because we haven't done Hardcore yet.
Yeah, so Hardcore, I think we're going to hit sometime next year. I really want to talk about that because his performance in that is fantastic as well.
Oh, yeah.
But starring George C. Scott alongside Trish Van Devere.
Yes, his wife.
His wife, yeah, which I thought was cool. They do have some on-screen chemistry, I was glad to see. And then a lot of actors I actually didn't recognize that much. Like, I recognized Melvin Douglas. But beyond that, I was like, this is kind of they're using some older actors here. And it works in the film because they are generally trying to go for something, I think, a little bit more classical and old-fashioned with this one. It's definitely picking up on similar trends from the 70s, because this is 1980, but this was definitely, 1980 is always a fascinating year because it was that transition period where, movies still had a lot of 70s style to them. So this definitely, sort of like The Sentinel, does have a lot of, post-Exorcist, post-The Omen kind of vibes to it. But I did find that this just had, especially, double featuring this with The Sentinel, watching it right after, impeccable control of its mood.
The craft is unreal.
Yes.
Just nonstop, really nice wide shots. It has this very quiet, ambient sound design to it. Incredible use of like wide angle lenses and overhead shots inside the various spaces and rooms. It just has a really amazing sense of eeriness and solitude and emptiness. The majority of this movie is just like lonely shots of George C. Scott dwarfed by his surroundings,
yes.
or just like walking or sitting around and investigating. And it really works for this movie, which is, him investigating sort of this history of, violence and this sort of the crimes of the past that involve a senator and involve the harm of children and money and power. And that those things have all kind of like basically seeped themselves very naturally, almost over years, into this house. And this house, in a way, starts speaking to him because he's on the same wavelength of the tragedy of the house, which we'll get to, but involves this sort of like this opening sequence where George C. Scott is on vacation with his kid and wife, and the wind is howling and they're laughing and playing in the snow, but their car has died. Yeah, and he's in upstate New York, and he stops at a payphone booth to call roadside emergency, and there's just incredible close up on his face as he makes the call with a rack focus and a zoom at this car in the background, ripping down the slushy street, causing a truck to crash into their car and crush his family. Freeze frame title. And I was like, immediately I was like, okay, that's going to be the vibe. It's going to have this very gloomy, dark, kind of feel bad vibe to it, but also this really interesting like passiveness. Something kind of slow and classy and quiet about it that I think just made it even more kind of creepy to me.
Yeah. And that, my friends, is how you do mood in a horror film. Like streets ahead of The Sentinel. And additionally, what puts it head and shoulders above the previous movie is that it is a critique of institutions on one level. Like, there are themes in this movie beyond just like, oh man, isn't this stuff gross and weird?
Yeah, and not only that, they interact with the character work and the emotional and the headspace of the character. Like, those two things at a certain point become kind of indistinguishable. Like, his personal pain, which the movie immediately sets into you with this mood, and then obviously accompanied by this very sort of lonely kind of spare piano score that it likes to do, accompanying visions of like, his kid playing in these empty rooms. that used to be filled with life.
Yes.
And the way that he
And-
films it too, like he'll frame it in the exact way that he's seeing his child in the flashback. So when it quickly cuts to the actual flashback, it still feels like he's right there in the perspective that he is inside the room. And so it's just like this flawless editing that I really like to connect the past and the present really good. And also, once again, just to get this out of the way, I love that they freeze frame on his shock and pain just to establish the movie itself. Like that's the title card. Unbelievable. Then it just goes to him like lonely walking through the is it New York City?
Yeah, New York.
Yeah. And it's just sad and painful. But yeah, continue.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned too, which I think is a really good point, which is that, you know, the way that it uses the space where he sees an empty space, but then all of a sudden it has, you know, previous memories in the same shot of the kid occupying that space. And this movie becomes this is really important visual information, which is that, you know, like these houses and these rooms and these walls, they absorb the things that they see, and they absorb the things that you do in them. Like life kind of is still there inside of them in a way. And this is such a really interesting visual way to capture that, because it becomes the visual sensibility of the entire film as he has someone else who has experienced tragedy in this new house that he's moved into, literally trying to communicate with him through those same, you know, sort of visual approaches that we're seeing in that sequence. So like that moment is not just like, oh, he's sad, oh, his family died. You know, it is also setting up what is going to carry through the visual sensibility of the entire film and be the drama of the film.
And and that idea,
just smart filmmaking.
That idea, which is so intrinsic to much horror, which is that horrible deeds don't just dissipate when they're done. They sink into the landscape.
They infect
the environment. Excuse me. One of my favorite examples of this is a British teleplay called The Stone Tape, written by Nigel Neal. Have you guys seen that?
No.
I don't think so, no.
Highly, highly, highly recommend any Nigel Neal, but I especially love The Stone Tape, which is about a group of technicians going to an old English house and finding that the stones themselves have recorded all kinds of malignant horror. And you want to talk about mood. It's absolutely exquisite in The Stone Tape. And that is also true of The Changeling. And it enriches the theme of the critique of institutions, which is that, you know, these horrible deeds can be hidden to a degree, but, you know, the bones still lie under the earth. The house remembers, and there are presences which will dredge up every bit of their power to try to communicate what has happened to them. And that creates that intensely unsettled mood that you get from the best horror movies, the sense that something is lurking and it's going to come out, you know, in spite of the best efforts of the powerful to keep it from coming out.
Yeah, I love one of the first things that it does in order to communicate, which is just this like banging at 6 a.m, and it just reverberates through the entire house. It's just an effective way to create atmosphere, for one, just because of like the echo. It kind of gives this sense of how large the location is that he's living in. Yes. And just that, like, the 6 a.m. wake up call to, it's like, I'm trying to connect with you. I'm trying to communicate. I think that was a really effective way to start the, I guess, the ghostly happenings.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and worth noting, this house is a feat in production design, because this house doesn't exist. It was the interior. The interiors of this house are entirely sets built in Vancouver. And the exteriors are actually a house that they basically didn't like, but they liked the property it was on. So they basically like covered it. I'm not sure if I couldn't find any more detail if it was meant to be like some sort of tarp, or they literally like pasted like like a new house like on top as like a facade or something. I couldn't figure out exactly how they did it, but they said that this house doesn't exist. But they because they wanted this perfect Victorian kind of era architecture, and they just literally couldn't find anywhere that had what they wanted. And so the way that that is what I assume gives the camera the freedom that it has in this film, because again, this film is just filled with beautiful like roaming dolly and steady cam shots around the house, kind of emphasizing how big and empty it is and how kind of lonely the George C. Scott character, now without a family, is inside. You know, he's playing a musical composer, so a lot of scenes are him, you know, trying to write music and the music carrying through the house, and you can feel it reverberating through as the camera is literally moving through it. Or you get like really beautiful like overhead shots like from the attic, like looking down the entire staircase and looking at George C. Scott, who was like looking up at the chandelier. I was reminded of that shot, Jamie, we talked about from Psycho, where you get that overhead shot looking down the entire staircase as people are constantly coming through the front door.
Yeah, definitely.
And and you can kind of see them, you know, the layout of the house from there. So that stuff's all like really incredible.
I love too. He uses it quite a few times in the movie. POVs. Like the one shot I loved was when George C. Scott first finds the attic, where he finds the loose boards, he tears it all down, finds this doorway. And first it's just a shot of him.
And he hammers that the lock off the handle, right? I just remember that because it was one of my favorite parts. Yeah, because he's hammering it. And one of the best parts of the sound design is because the sound design is very quiet. And when it gets loud, it's very deliberate. And the sound design gets very loud in that moment because the house is literally echoing and talking back to him about the fact that he is like using violence on it to open the door. And like, that's a really emphasized moment.
I also felt like because the ghost was trying to kind of have him discover these things, that when he was in rhythm with the hitting, that was kind of like them connecting in a little way.
Yes.
So he broke through the door and then he finds out what happened in the house, and that's kind of the unraveling of the mystery a little bit. So
absolutely. It's not the only time they even relate to each other via music, right? One of my favorite elements is he writes that there's a great little shot of him composing and recording that new sort of like lullaby styled piece that he's working on, and there's a couple little cool little visual background suspense images of like doors opening or the piano playing on its own that they kind of set up that, you know, something paranormal is happening. But the part that you're talking about, which was you're talking about the handheld POV of him like going up the stairs and moving the cobwebs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and I love that connection because you were talking, it was like the first camera angle is him showing it's like kind of right on the bottom stairs almost, and you can see the entire staircase and him going up, and then it cuts to his POV when he's in the middle of going up that, and you just instantly get this realization of how old this location is. There's cobwebs everywhere. The camera's moving through cobwebs, which is very cool. And then when he gets to the attic, I don't know if it's the exact same angle, but they present the room in a way that's very similar to how they do later on when they actually show the boy's murder and the room itself. So just a lot of really great ways using the camera to connect all these things. There's even moments where he uses the POV to go into the past. Like there's a shot that goes all the way up the stairs into the attic, and then it transforms into the past where you see the boy and the father and all of that. So some really, really great stuff like that.
No, just really intelligent, like old-fashioned directing.
Really well done. Yeah, well thought out.
The shot that you were referring to, I think, is the stuff where it does the wide-angle overhead shots, because it does it of almost like every room that they go in this place, where it's just constantly watching. I feel like it's literally meant to be like house POV or something. I'm not entirely sure because like it is a really strange but beautiful way to compose it. And it just adds to the strangeness of moments, like as I was mentioning, how the house communicates with him through music. When he opens up the little boy's dusty music box and it literally plays his song back to him.
Yeah.
So it's not just the echoing of sounds he's making. Literally, the material itself, the house itself, is absorbing full tunes and being like, we're really trying to talk with you, man. You have been through some really incredible emotional strain and tragedy that has connected you with what we feel. Mm-hmm. So it's like literally two characters, George C. Scott and the house, on like this wavelength of basically just like a death that they both sense each other in. And it's very funny when they go to him and they're like, is it possible that you're like hallucinating? And the funniest aspect of this film, unlike any other haunted house movie that you've probably ever seen, this is like one of the most rational characters who's ever starred in a movie like this. Like he's all investigation. He's never shocked or like completely scared.
Yeah, that's true.
Even though he should be.
There's a moment where he actually sees the little boy, an apparition in the tub. And he doesn't have him, like, he's scared. It's clearly that he's uncomfortable, but he doesn't like scream or anything.
He just
like that.
walks back into the shadows, right?
It's just like the shocking thing that he's like, something is wrong here. But instead of me running away from it, I'm just even more intrigued, and I'm going to try to crack the case, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of read that as that he already experienced the shock.
Right, sure.
Like in the opening sequence. Mm-hmm. So it's like that's not his reaction to this kind of stuff anymore. He knows that this is kind of like part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus like as an artist, a creative person who has experienced trauma, like, he's sensitive to these things. He's not excuse me. He's not a sensitive old stick in the mud, which is also why he so fervently goes against the people who did this child. Like, he understands the wrong that has occurred here. And when he feels someone crying out in pain, like, he's going to respond to it in spite of the fact that it is really terrifying. But he's going to try to understand and to help.
Yeah, which I guess that would kind of lead into the that like seance scene. Which we've seen things like this obviously because in haunted house horror movies the seance is a big cliche at this point. But I really like the way that they present the communication aspect of it. Like the psychic is channeling the spirit, and instead of just talking, which she does do, she's also writing constantly, but it's very gibberish. Like it's hard to tell exactly what she's writing. And whenever she's not writing anything down, she's constantly just squiggling black lines as if she's like communicating with some dark void at times. And I just liked the cutting. It's very fast paced. It's very exciting, honestly. So
the automatic writing is cool. And I really enjoy 70s cinema, and especially like 70s cinema dealing with the paranormal, because they will always delve into these kind of like in search of topics like seances and automatic writing. And I really feel like this couple in the movie, the paranormal investigator couple, were based. What's the name of that couple that they're like real life paranormal investigators?
Oh yeah,
the Warrens or something like that.
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The one that they based all the Conjuring films on.
Yes,
right.
exactly. Like they did this.
Which you definitely get vibes of in this. Like if we're just talking about modern films.
Yeah, because I think that in the creation of this film, like the writers did a lot of research into paranormal happenings, whether you believe them to be real or not. They really did a deep dive, and I think this is based on an actual.
Yeah, apparently.
No, it is. I actually looked that up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's based on the writer of the story, and he says, essentially, he says that the major plot points of this story is what happened. He said that he had some disturbances. He felt like something was trying to communicate with him, and he even went to a certain address that had bones that they found. And so I don't know, like, if this has been a documented story, but if it is real, then that is kind of crazy.
Yeah,
so.
no, supposedly based on the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
Where supposedly a playwright lived there in the 1960s, and that dude claimed that he heard disturbing noises and presences and did this seance, and he was told that a little boy's spirit directed him to a part of the property where they found human remains and a gold medallion with the boy's name on it. Nothing happened after that because they weren't sure what to do with the investigation, because the previous owner, unlike in this film, which they changed for the drama, the previous owner of the house did not have kids. So they weren't sure if they were meant to look further generations back or what they had even found.
And that kind of comes into play with this too, where they start to say, like, the cops aren't going to do anything. It's a 50-year case. George C. Scott, have to do it. Yeah.
And, he's right, because, like, what are the cops going to do? Like, we know how that goes. And in fact, a cop does come to the house to try to pressure him and scare him off the case, only to get his just desserts, which is nice. You don't tend to see that in real life.
Yeah, and shortly after this film came out, too, it's worth noting a kind of quasi-connection to the Sentinel. The house that this supposedly happened in, that the playwright lived in real life in Colorado, shortly after this film came out, it was demolished to make room for high-rise apartments, just like the end of the Sentinel.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to say that it burned down mysteriously, which would have been... Which would have been creepier, sick, but no, it's just progress every time.
No, I think, and worth noting, and especially in comparison to the Sentinel, I think that the procedural elements of this are actually really great.
Yes.
That George C. Scott is such a fun character and presence to be going on a little detective hunt with. I mean, like, again, we've covered Exorcist 3 on this show. We are going to be covering Hardcore at some point. If you need some sort of Catholic grandpa from the Midwest or upstate New York
who likes to
run
yell
around and who likes to yell and go detective mode in hospitals, churches, haunted houses, porno sets. He's the guy that you call to do that. He's so great at
Unbelievably good.
And the mystery is just, like, effectively layered. Like, the fact that he is investigating these violent crimes of power and money on children, literal children in America, and how that has made its way into the imagery of the house, where he's seeing things like the broken sort of red stained glass from the attic, or we didn't talk about it, but the actual attic itself, where the sickly kid was, where his room was and where he was killed. Like the little tiny covered in cobwebs and dust, like wheelchair there and stuff like that, which they eventually reuse in parts of the film, and obviously became the poster of the film because it's such a great little creepy image.
May I tell a funny anecdote about the time when I saw this movie? Not involving a wheelchair, but involving a staircase.
All right.
Okay.
So I saw this it must have been, it was like 2018. I had taken a trip to New York, and while I was there, a friend called me and said, "Hey, do you want to go see The Changeling at the Metrograph?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to go see The Changeling at the Metrograph," because I'd never seen it, and it looked cool. And while I was in New York, I had been obliged to get an Airbnb in Brooklyn. And when I got to the building, I found that the place that I had rented was this strange kind of basement space, which had been renovated into a place where one could live if one were obliged to. It looked like the kind of dwelling that, like, a respected pillar of the community would build in secret for the daughter that he secretly had, like, 11 children with and forced to live down there. It was a very creepy space, like, livable, but it was like underground access by, like, a little stair, something that I'm not really used to, like coming from California, the West Coast. But, I guess a lot of people in New York live like this because, real estate is at a premium. No windows, of course, like completely subterranean. And when I got inside, I noticed that there was a mysterious staircase that led up to another room with a locked door. I was like, okay,
no.
well, I assume nobody's going to come through that door while I'm here. Like, maybe I'm just telling myself that to make myself feel better, but all right, whatever. So, I got the invitation to go see the movie. So I, left the place, turned off all the lights, locked the door very carefully, because this is an unfamiliar area to me, and, went to the Lower East Side to the Metrograph. Saw the movie. It was great. Really enjoyed it. Came back, opened the door to my little basement Airbnb, and I noticed there was a light on inside.
Oh, no.
And I was like, I didn't turn that light on. And I came in, and the light at the head of this mysterious stairway was on. Now, I did not turn this on, and I had just come to see a movie in which very foreboding stairways had figured prominently.
Yeah.
And so I texted my friend and
also
I said,
one with at the top of it a locked door.
Right. And so I texted my friend and I was like, I took a picture and I was like, dude, you're not going to believe like what I came across when I got back. This is freaking me out. And he texted back, is there a wheelchair at the top? And I was like,
I was just going to ask, did you get chased by a wheelchair?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say I was shitting my pants, but damn near. I was like, I'm going to bed. Man. that was how the Changeling seemed to have followed me home from the movie theater. It was a very funny experience. In retrospect.
Obviously a very effective movie too.
Oh yeah, like
it worked. I mean, you could not look at stairs the same again.
Yeah, this one.
All of those low angle shots of the stairs are, genuinely, imposing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and again, God bless Peter Medak and his crew, because this is god tier mood making. It is so creepy and oppressive that that is what the best of horror gives you. That experience of watching in tension and kind of a growing fear just from being in a place. Yeah, a grotty little retrofitted basement apartment in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, they use like these kind of very classic horror elements all the time. Like the stairs are used again with a I would call it maybe a cliche at this point. I don't know if it would be back then, but like when the ball drops slowly onto the floor, and it's great. At first I'm like, okay, the ball gag, here we go, But then the way that they present it, like he's just alone in the room, in the study, and you see it from the staircase. So you see him in the room, but the camera isn't inside.
House literally trying to play with him like it's his child.
And then when he gets so frustrated, he takes the ball and just chucks it into a river nearby the house. And when he returns, the moment he gets into the front foyer, that thing is just bouncing again, wet from the river, right in front of his feet. And I couldn't help but think like this is something that is kind of like a classic horror thing that I've seen before, but just the way they present it, the timing, the atmosphere, the camera angles, it's just it does elevate it. It truly is like the craft that makes this work as well as it does, I find.
Yeah, and I would say not only that, because you're right, the craft I think is a huge part. I remember I looked up what kind of reviews were like at the time, and I remember looking up the Ebert's review said something along the lines of like, if craft was the only thing that mattered in a movie, this would be like the best movie I've ever seen or something like that. Because he was kind of like he had some criticisms of some of it, but everyone, even people who were kind of like middling on the film, were like, this is an amazingly crafted film. Yeah, the thing that kind of blows me away is how emotionally engaged that moment leads you to be, because we've already seen the little girl playing with the ball. Yeah. Well, and the way that it's developing via the story, where it's telling you that, in the seance, they tell him this house is reaching out to you via your loss because it shares experiences with you. This is a child who is not at peace, and it cannot rest. And so like that's why. So not only that, like the creepy things that are happening are motivated by character and emotion at the same time. A lot of the time when you see stuff like this now, even in
it's just
a 2021 modern polished haunted house movie, it's just like sometimes the craft and sometimes the mood is there. but like a lot of time it really is just unmotivated. They're like, well, this kind of creeps people out for some reason, you know,
well,
like that's all there is
you know what
to
it is that and this was why filmmaking got really good again in the 70s, was because it was very character focused. And you know, sometimes watching current movies, you feel like, you know, like people, like story is really the hardest thing to do. Like to put together a coherent narrative that makes sense is very difficult. But sometimes I don't even think that it's the toughest thing to do in feature filmmaking. I really feel like the thing that tends to escape people is creating compelling characters whose emotions and choices integrate into the narrative. And that's why a lot of, you know, and I can't even blame current horror to a degree, because like this has always been a failing of many genre movies, not just horror, is that they forget that to make a movie like truly memorable, you have to put emotional weight into it. You have to care about the characters. You have to understand why they do the things they do. And often characters will do inexplicable things because people do inexplicable things. And like a really good filmmaker is able to make you understand why that person is making those choices. So many filmmakers fail at that. It's like they're, you know, and you know, that is a failing of horror as well, where the thing that people complain about is like, oh, well, you know, the characters just do stupid things because like they need to be there to get killed or whatever. But you know, people are irrational, and if you can put across like their irrationality and their subjective feelings, like you end up with a much stronger film.
Yeah, and I do think it works like what you were saying, Josh, too. It works on a level that obviously on a horror level it works just in the ghostly aspects of it, but it is kind of a moment that it frightens him, but I think it's also a more motivation to continue investigating because he just keeps making these connections between the daughter and this little boy. He can't help but feel like this might even maybe be a cathartic thing for him, something to release this grief by helping somebody from the past. So, and I kind of like too that the ghost, the boy, is just so it implies that he's just insistent. Like he's like, no, like keep paying attention to me. Like I need help, and honestly, I think you need help. So we can kind of do this together in a way. And I like that the boy, you know, it kind of rings with the 6 a.m. wake up call that he's constantly doing, and then all these just disturbances that kind of pile on top of each other as the film goes.
Well, yeah, I like when you get to actually like hear his voice in the seance, and he's just like,
so scary.
Father, and the camera's like moving along the banister slowly, and then doors are slamming, and objects are shattering, and like lights are going, you know, everywhere, and you get again these really creepy both POV shots, and you get these dolly shots, and you get these wide angles of the various spaces that they're in, where you can see like when it repeats the overhead wide of the room where he saw the dusty music box and the wheelchair, but now, you know, we're getting the point of view of the father who has just literally drowned his son. And the way that the
way he does it, oh my god.
Well, the thing that I
asshole.
found the most impactful was the kid pounding his fist on the tub, creating that metronome effect that he was getting when he was hammering the lock.
Yes.
So like little connections like that, where like the style is just very confident and very like thought through in that way.
And just to add to the gross aspect of it, to make it so like he can't use his legs. He's handicapped from, I believe, from the waist down, it seems. And his dad grabs him by the legs that he can't use in order to drown him. And there's just like that added imagery of that's how he does it. Like of
him holding his feet there while like he's thrashing, and then the bubbles disappear.
It's somehow even grosser. It's very effective.
Here that was a connection I didn't pick up on until now. But this is literally both of these movies also use disabled characters in different ways.
Yeah, they do.
This one has a lot of pain and sympathy for this child.
Yes, yeah.
And I guess that's where like the Sentinel is a somewhat like ugly and exploitive movie, The Changeling is a deeply humanistic movie, because this is about, like, this is a cry for help from not only a child, but a disabled child. Like, one of them, like, and, you know, if you pay attention at all, like, you'll know that the disabled, like, experience, like, a really disproportionate amount of violence and abuse in our society. And this movie is a really good crystallization of that idea, like what happens to the most vulnerable and how these things get buried, often quite literally, by people in power.
Yeah, and and the way that they twist the kind of like connections to power by the reason that the father ends up killing his son is because he doesn't want his handicapped son to have the fortune that he'll get when he's like 20 or 21. So he kills him. And then he ends up, and this is, I guess, where the second half of the film comes into play. It ends up that he had another son. No, he adopted a son from an orphanage, and he grew him up to become a United States senator.
Yeah.
And
yes.
And I
very
just
Kennedy-esque.
love that Yeah. I love that. Just like, I guess it's not ancient. It's only, I guess this ghost story would be like a century old when the murder took place or something like that. But I love those, like these decades of horrific violence that leads into today's power, I guess.
Yes.
It was.
I love how
connection was cool.
mundanely he finds that out, because for George C. Scott, literally, he goes to the library, he goes to the city planner's office, he goes to all these various locations, and literally goes, okay, so this is just like hiding in plain sight. Like they just this dude just killed his disabled son,
and no one looked into it.
He didn't want him to be the future of his family because he's, you know, an asshole. Yep. And he found a son that he wanted and he preferred, and just said, okay, well, now he's going to get the inheritance, and I'm going to, you know, get him into politics. And watching like George C. Scott like run across the airport strip, like yelling at him. He's like, I found this. Which, speaking of which, we didn't get to the part where they find the house where they think that the boy might be buried. And the young girl keeps like seeing the little boy in her room under the floor, like drowning, because like the house was built on top of the well that his body was tossed in.
Didn't
there's an incredible overhead shot of him digging in the well as the flashlight is like shining up at them and everything like that. And they find the little boy's remains in there with they find the skeleton hand and everything like that. And also his christening medal as well.
Yeah. And I just got big The Ring vibes from this scene. I don't know about you. I liked 100%. Too that while he's digging, he doesn't see it himself, but the audience sees that the hand actually rises up, like it's animated a little bit. So it's just another thing where it's like the ghost is trying to communicate, and I just love the visual flair that brings.
Yes, same thing with the medallion. It literally like pushes its way out of the dirt to like be like, here's your proof, and that's what he uses to go and interrogate the senator. Which then the senator just thinks that he's being blackmailed with a scandal that is just made up.
And instead it turns out that this isn't just like your average blackmail scheme that he's apparently run across many times. Like this is something which strikes to the very core of his identity, which is why he is so profoundly shaken. Like not just his own identity, but like the integrity of his father, who he obviously, admires. And he's like, how dare you come in here and tell me that my father's done these things? It wrecks him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what that to me was the most interesting element, was that by the time you're getting swept up in the mystery and in the pain of this child, and all of this, and you're getting, you're meant to be kind of getting into the child's rage a little bit that he eventually expresses in the big finale, that, this injustice has been done, and, he's going to get the truth out there and he's going to do something about this. There's something so complicated about the sequence where he actually goes and tells him about all of this. And he's like, look, I found this house that has a history of strange happenings. There's a manifestation, a disturbance. We found bones in the well. Your father adopted you and replaced you and named you after his actual disabled child that he killed because he preferred you, and that is why you have the things that you have. None of this is yours. You're the beneficiary of the cruelest kind of murder for profit.
Yeah.
Is what he says to him. And it's really pointed, and he's very just in this moment. But the way that he watches it break this old man, where he's like, no, my father was a great man. He was a lovely man. The portrait is there on his desk. And he's literally just completely shattered by this idea, because once again, all he's doing is he's not getting revenge on the father. He's getting revenge on another little boy who was just from an orphanage, you know?
Yeah. And that's,
and in that moment, he realizes he's causing pain.
Yeah.
He's causing more pain. And he literally gives him all the evidence and then leaves and says, I'm like so sorry to do this to you.
Yeah. Because
and that's like such a complicated emotional moment.
Yeah. And, because like, it's kind of like how, I don't know why I'm drawing this connection, but it's kind of like how, like, at the end of the climax of Unforgiven, like, you're kind of waiting for this, like, this cathartic revenge scene, and, like, Eastwood gives it to you, but he kind of, like, crams it down your throat. It's like, oh yeah, this is what you fucking want, huh? Like, you want to see like this violent resolution. You're like, oh God, no, I don't want this at all. It's like the same. It's
it still feel bad and ugly.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, exactly.
It's and you get a muted version of that in the Changeling, which I think is like, that's like pretty like morally advanced thinking, where I mean, and this guy's like a scumbag. Like, he's a wealthy senator. Like, he's just, he's the ruling class. He's, he sucks. But, at one time he was a boy, and he is still a man and a human being. And to see him break, and then to see George C. Scott in his performance, like, kind of respond to that, because his character is truly compassionate. Like, he can't just destroy this old man. He is not. He kind of pushes him toward a kind of like psychic and eventual like actual like material death. But it's just kind of like, hey man, I'm just laying it out for you. You can do what you want with this.
Yeah, that scene felt like he was battling with his almost past perception of his father and their relationship, and it was like too much for him, because he's staring into the portrait, and like it's shaking, and he's almost having like it almost feels like a psychic confrontation of some sort.
That was one of my favorite elements, is because literally George C. Scott is helping this boy and this house get closure over this tragedy, this horrible thing that's happened. And what's so interesting is that by the time he actually is in the position to get it, to help the house, use all the evidence the house has given him and the boy has given him, to stick it to this old man, it doesn't feel good to stick it to the old man, because he's like, this old man was also just a little boy who had no idea what his father was doing.
Right.
And the house is actually extremely unhappy with that development and starts trying to kill Claire in this like really creepy stalking sequence where it pretends to be John using his voice, and then actually chases her down the stairs in a POV shot of the camera attached to the wheelchair, which was so sick.
Unbelievably awesome. Yeah.
There's a great slow-mo sequence of George C. Scott walking along the second floor banister as the chandelier is swinging back and forth, and the house is like literally raging out.
I love literally like the gusts of wind burst him onto the first floor again. Like, it's just so much power. Yeah,
the house lights itself on fire and everything like that. And meanwhile, the senator,
it's so cool.
Yeah.
The senator is literally looking on his desk at this photo as it starts to rumble, and he starts to realize, by comparing the medallion they found from the little boy's well to the one that he owns, that what George C. Scott had told him about what his father had done was true, and this actually transports him back. So he's literally sitting at his desk holding the photo as it rumbles, and then he's transported into the blazing house where he realizes the truth and horror of his birth and his life, and he climbs the stairs the same way that the father did.
Yeah. Oh man, that imagery is great.
And I love that. I know people. I think people, I don't know if I want to say generally people prefer like a happy ending and a complete resolution. Like, certainly that is.
Oh no, I am noted
Josh
on this
does
show.
not.
I love the misery.
Well, yeah, like what I'm getting at is that
Every time we have a movie that ends happily, I'm always like, I would have liked it a little bit more.
If everyone died.
yeah, that's exactly it. I think that quite frequently audiences are more sophisticated than studios will estimate, and studios are very afraid to kind of put out a downer ending. And the resolution of the Changeling like really rings true because there is like a certain amount of resolution and payback. Kind of what you would maybe get in, like, you know, to use the phrase from Wayne's World 2, Wayne's World, the mega happy ending would be like not just the finding of Joseph's bones in the medallion, it would be a complete public exposure of the Carmichael family, like the disgrace of the senator, like this entire story coming out, like that this man is illegitimate, that everyone's going to know about this scandal, like that would be the happy ending catharsis that you might want. But you know, we as consumers of art, we also live in the real world, and we know, again, if you pay attention at all, you know how these things usually work. Like these things usually get buried when there is like a public reckoning. It's often anticlimactic. It's like, yes, they got Jeffrey Epstein, but oops, he's dead. And who knows how the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is going to go? Like, it's not going to. It's not going to end with her being like publicly executed for, you know, crimes against children and you know, public decency. And I think that is an indication of the best and bravest filmmakers, the ones who are not kind of trying to mold reality to what they would like it to be, but making something which truly reflects human experience and how, you know, there are small measures of satisfaction in life, but often like quite a bit of dissatisfaction that we have to live with. And you know what, like in The Changeling, it's like I'm happy enough that that John, the main character, got to the bottom of the mystery. He let the dead speak, and he got out of the house with Claire. Okay, that's enough. Like the house burned to the ground. It's like, okay, you know, we didn't get the massive public reckoning, but this is still there's still a bit of closure for the characters and the audience.
It's like there's
that was what I found really
spirit.
interesting about it.
Yes.
Yeah, closure for the spirit, but not quite for like us as a society as a whole.
Yeah, because like these forces are like simply too powerful, and you know that's how how capital operates. Like they're going to steamroll you, and you know we can only kind of, you know, that doesn't mean like it doesn't mean stop fighting. It just means like, you know, accept that often you're just going to get like that tiny corner of satisfaction. You know, like the story will out in some respect, even if there isn't like a kind of human, you know, the justice, quote unquote, of the human world, like our spheres of law enforcement. Like you're not going to get it from there. You've got to find it somewhere else.
Well, I even liked that just in this final sequence where there is like some sense of, you know, that the boy in the house are getting some sense of closure by confronting this boy who is the changeling who took his place after something horrible happened to him.
Yes.
But there is something, I think, so, you know, the sheer visual rage of the house, the way that it's attacking without direction, it seems, the way that it almost kills George C. Scott by dropping the chandelier on him and trying to do various things like that. So the sheer rage of the house, combined with the fact that we do get a little bit of emotional complication with the old man who, you know, is very shattered by the fact that his father is a terrible person and, you know, might not have done the same thing that his father did, even though he takes the place and he does offer himself up as the sacrifice for that, is interesting. But to have that just feel like such a bummer by the time you hit the end of this film. Where it's like you are very clearly watching, you know, the narrative being resolved, but it doesn't feel amazing. It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like, you know, this stuff happens in the world and it sits in the walls until it gets a chance to lash back at the world again, and that's it. And whether it hits the right target or whether it, it doesn't really matter. It's just looking for, in the end, we are just going to be sitting in that morning shot in the remains of the charred property.
Yeah, and
with the wheelchair and the music box and the little lullaby playing again and stuff like that. Like that's the image that you're left with. You're not left with, some sort of justice. You are just left with pure destruction.
Yeah, and that is often the kind of thing which comes out of trauma and it is why, like, we as a society kind of struggle with the traumatized. It's like with the the empathetic side of us wants to help them, but often in their rage and pain, they lash out. Like, traumatized people can be very difficult to deal with. Like, they will often hurt the people around them because they hurt so profoundly. And, there's like a spectrum of hurt. There are some people who, because they were so deeply traumatized, will act out like really malignantly. And then there are the people on like the lower end of the spectrum who are not like truly malicious people, but, still are not, maybe haven't processed their trauma in such a way that they're able to not lash out at people. And, the expression of the house is just that intensity of rage and pain where it hurts the man and the woman who tried to help because, things appear to be slipping away to, the house and Joseph. Like, maybe there isn't going to be like a resolution. And as such, it lashes out. It's really powerful imagery.
Yeah. Yeah, pivoting towards reductive rating around here. This one gets a solid, maybe even a high 4 for me, because I really did find it I found the style of it just very beautiful and very graceful, and the control over its tone, that just the way that it feels so lonely and grief-stricken in both its mood and its atmosphere. So many fantastic, like, intelligent directorial choices, on display. The slow zooms, the shadowy corridor compositions, the creepy handheld POV tracking shots, the beautiful, sort of wide-angle overhead images of all the various locations they do, including, again, this amazing feat of production design, which is the interior of this Victorian architectured house that they built all the interiors for, and all of it complemented, honestly, just by the kind of quiet, kind of constant the constant wind sounds of the sound design, and the very spare piano score that, again, it kind of has the lullaby quality of the characters' music, but also has this ghostly kind of twinkling to it as well. All of it just really emphasizes the feelings that both the George C. Scott's character and the little boy is going through of this emptiness and loss that they've experienced. And I love the way that the horrifying tragedy and violent rage, that is at the heart of this movie has just, through the style and the narrative, has literally seeped into the walls of this house and been absorbed the same way that his song is absorbed into the music box. And it's been contained for so long that when it finally gets out, it's just it has a very feel bad sense to the revenge. Feels more like doomed repetition than it does any sort of like cathartic justice. And beyond that, just very effective and old fashioned piece of spooky filmmaking. For me, I really loved it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a solid 4 for me. Another great George C. Scott performance. I do love all his his moments of loneliness and sadness, but he does, of course, get to have a couple outbursts that I love, like when he really starts to break down inside the house, and he's just yelling at the house like, "What do you want from me?" in a classic George C. Scott fashion. So I love that stuff, and I actually am shocked when you told me at the beginning of this that a lot of the house is set design, because it looks very authentic, I found. And they have a lot of really awesome camera work. They show that staircase quite a bit, and it is very large and well put together. And the way that they use it at the end, when the house just starts to rumble and you see that chandelier just swinging violently beside him. There's just really, really great set design, and yeah, the connections between his loss and the violent death of Joseph, I think it's definitely much better and much more realized than the Sentinel is. If we're comparing the two, it's just he has a real attention to detail when it comes to the characters' traumas and kind of the catharsis that they're looking for. I think it's just very well thought out, and the craft is impeccable. I love all the way that the camera moves. Like, once again, the shot from establishing the staircase to the POV of George going up the staircase to the wide shot of the attic itself. Like, there's such a way of communicating those the imagery, and it's great. So yeah, 4 out of 5. I'm going to be revisiting this. This is definitely going to be like a Halloween go-to.
Hell yeah. For you, Jen.
I did not run to Letterboxd to angrily rate this one. Excuse me. I, of course, really enjoyed it. Revisiting it, enjoyed it just as much. I would probably put it in the, because of the sophistication of the themes and of the production design and the cinematography and direction, I would even push it into maybe like 4.5-star category. That's
nice.
Probably what I'm going to give it on Letterboxd, just because the film is so powerfully affecting as both a horror film and also as, again, a critique of institutions and capital. It really makes the movie a standout for me. A quick word that I want to say about Peter Medak, and if I may make a recommendation to the audience. Peter Medak has had a little bit of a bumpy career, but he has managed to keep working. He has he was able to recover from a significant speed bump in his career in the mid-'70s with an unreleased film called Ghost in the Noonday Sun, starring Peter Sellers. And I would like to recommend to the audience his actually, like, you guys might have to cut or cut my my fumbling here, because I want to actually get the name of this
oh yeah, for sure,
this documentary correctly. So let me take this over. I want to recommend to the audience that they take a look at a documentary directed by Peter Medak called The Ghost of Peter Sellers. This came out in 2018. You can find this on streaming for rent. And it is Peter Medak going back and...
Oh, yeah, it's on Criterion Channel right now, too.
Oh, is it?
Excellent.
That's great.
Apparently.
And I know that all of you already have the Criterion Channel, so what are you waiting for?
Oh, yeah.
Go watch it. Very, very nice documentary where Peter Medak goes back and revisits the very cursed making of Ghost in the Noonday Sun, a movie which was 100% sabotaged by its star. If you know anything about Peter Sellers, a master of his craft, a truly great comedian, but let's say a complicated man. And
okay. I didn't know much about him. I'm a fan of just his work, but I don't know much about the man himself.
Oh, I mean, there is... I could talk for another hour or two about Peter Sellers' private life. He was a deeply troubled man, and in the case of Ghosts in the Noonday Sun, they were trying to make a pirate movie on a Greek island, so they already had like production difficulties, and then they had a star who suddenly decided, like, you know what, I don't want to do this movie, but I don't know how to kind of sack up and be a man about it and just say, you know what, like, either I can't do this or we're going to have to do this a different way. Like, he just straight up, like, torpedoed the film. And so years later...
Just by horribly acting and stuff? Is that basically like he'd ruined the set and that's
just
in that
like
way?
Fucking around, not showing up, like, just being, just being
Completely
Peter Sellers.
Gotcha.
And Peter Medak went back. He talked to everybody he could who was still alive, who had worked on it, a lot of the crew, the producers, and really grapples with this experience. This was an appearance which appears to have hurt him profoundly. And I'm not talking just career-wise, although, you know, that's pretty obvious. He did recover, but emotionally, it really did a number on him. And the fact that he is able in this documentary to look at Peter Sellers, a person who has hurt him very deeply, with compassion, and to still call him a friend that he has some positive memories of, is really remarkable. And I'm super not into documentaries in which the filmmaker is, I don't want to say that he's not like the central subject, but yeah, like documentaries where the filmmaker is on camera, they tend to be very indulgent, in my opinion. This one works great because Medak has such like a delicate touch. And for anybody who is interested in movie production and kind of how agonizing making a feature can be, like, I highly recommend Ghost of Peter Sellers. And if our discussion of The Changeling has intrigued you of all, like, definitely take a look at that. Take a look at Peter Medak's other work. You know, Ruling Class is great. He's done some excellent TV work. He directed a couple episodes of Hannibal.
Oh, cool.
He directed Species 2.
Hell yeah.
Definitely
Hell
check
yeah.
that out. I have not had the pleasure, so I don't know if I can recommend that one. But he's definitely a filmmaker worth engaging with. He has done very fine work. He's still with us. So, well, I said, rest in peace to Michael Winter, Peter Medak. I love you. I hope you live to be 100. You're great. I love The Changeling. 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I'm going to be diving into this guy's work. He's clearly a talented man.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. Well, I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. That was The Sentinel from 1977 and The Changeling from 1980. Thanks so much, Jen, for joining us and for bringing these films with you.
Thank you for letting me bloviate. I enjoy it.
No problem. If you've got anything to plug while you're here, this is typically where we have you do that.
Yeah, if you don't already know, the finest and only odd media podcast on the internet, not really, is Have You Seen This? I do that with my co-host, Tim. You can check us out at patreon.com/Have You Seen This? For our most recent free episode, we did a deep dive into Fight Club, the very good David Fincher satire movie, which we both
I
love.
have seen that.
Yes. And you
I've
can
heard of that one.
You can kind of test the waters by going to anywhere where you get your fun podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you listen to shit. You can check out our Fight Club episode. And we also have some really primo bonus shit if you want to take the really deep dive at our Patreon. We just did an episode about Nothing But Trouble with the inimitable Matt Chrisman of Chapo Trap House. That's one that you do not want to miss. And you can get access to that and all our other bonus episodes, some 50 bonus episodes in total, for a pledge of as low as $2 a month. So go check us out, patreon.com/Have You Seen This?
Hell yeah. Can definitely recommend doing that. We are supporters of the Have You Seen This Patreon. So
and we are
go check it out.
eternally grateful for that, because like the support of our patrons like really keeps me going, like working on this stuff. I'm working like a ton of freelance jobs at once, and you know, just the fact that people want to pay us for our ramblings on weird and stupid movies, like, it means so much to me. And thank you guys.
How we feel too.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on Sleazoids, because this is, as you all know, this is also a really great podcast, and hopefully we can all do this again sometime, either on your show or mine.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, will do.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds great. For our listeners, in 1 week's time, we're going to be back with the big Christmas episode, actually going up Christmas Day. So if you're doing any sort of commuting that day or heading over to the families, you will have an episode from us to listen to, where we are going to be hitting the big boy that we've been kind of avoiding for like 3 or 4 years, Die Hard.
Yeah.
It's time to talk about it. Everyone talks about it around that time of year, but I thought of a good enough pairing that I was like, it's the time.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about one, Die Hard, obvious. And number 2, a movie called Dial Code Santa Claus, which is an incredible little trash film that Vinegar Syndrome just put out on a 4K Blu-ray, and is amazing. It does the Home Alone premise before Home Alone, and more genre-y and violent.
Right.
It's practically a little like 10-year-old boy doing a combination of Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Silent Night, Deadly Night.
More
where,
violent than
a
Home
dude
Alone.
dressed as Yes.
Holy shit. Okay. I'm checking this out. Thank you, Vinegar
So
Syndrome.
like Home Alone with blood and gore.
Yes.
Just fantastic.
Dial Code Santa Claus. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. We're going to be doing that alongside Die Hard next week. And then the episode after that is the first episode of every year. And it is the best genre movies of 2021, believe it or not.
Top 10.
There were genre movies that came out this year, and some of them were pretty good. And I know most of the patrons, the bonus listeners, they hear our bonus transmissions all year where we do deep dives on all the new genre movies that we like and some that we don't like. But the big free episode for everyone at the beginning of the year, we like to give everyone a little bit of catch up homework to do for all the stuff that they might have missed. So yeah, you're gonna hear us count down, each of us, our top 10 genre movies that came out in 2021, and there were some good ones. So
definitely.
I'm excited. But yeah, that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.